Ishnu Daldiab, my friend. Today we're burning the world tree as we take a look at the first era of World of Warcraft. Andrei.
Hello.
Have you played World of Warcraft? Yeah, you have. I know you have because we've talked about it on this podcast a bunch of times. That's the only place I know it from because we don't communicate in real life, of course.
Our friendship only exists on mic, and
Indeed.
That's it. But yes, I have played World of Warcraft, and I think we're going to talk about how we both came to the series this week, and how we, I think, fell in love with the game.
Yeah.
And how it shaped, I mean, for me at least, where I am today, or how I play games today. This era specifically for WoW.
I mean,
It's just like we could record like 11 podcasts just about World of Warcraft, but
yeah. And we may. And we may already have done so with how much we've talked about it on CTG Weekly. But this time we're going to talk about it in a bit of a different way. We're going to talk about it in the Have You Played way, where, you know, how did we come to this? What did this game mean to us? What is its personal legacy on us as people and players? Because it has one. But first, I think we should talk a little bit about how we're structuring, how we're going to approach World of Warcraft, because it originally came out in 2004. It is old as heck. It is a super old game with a ton of expansions, and it has gone through a few different eras. Now, the way we're going to think about this game, and we're going to split it into eras, we're not splitting it the same way the official documentation splits this into era. They believe that the game is in 3 eras overall. It's definitely 4. And we're going to start in era 1 here, which is the base game, the first expansion, the Burning Crusade, and the second expansion, Wrath of the Lich King. To me, is the first era of World of Warcraft. And then things go off the rails.
I would split it the same way, and I feel like the eras, for me at least, correspond to very specific eras of my life and where I was at with games and when I got to them, and they sort of track, I think, like the end of my adolescence to where I am now. Yeah. Which, you know, you can split into 4 parts.
I see it a bit differently. I think that each of the eras have very different kind of design philosophies and kind of like subdermal mechanical elements in the game that are pervasive across all the expansion splits. And we have now most recently entered into the 4th era with Dragonflight that has come out. But I don't want to get bogged down in the eras too much. Don't be too upset if we're not splitting them the same way Blizzard splits them. I am fairly confident that I can make an argument if the day comes where I need to, that it is in fact 4 eras of this game and not 3 that we're at right now. But you know, we're doing this for our own purposes, even though I think we're right about how we're splitting them.
Mostly, I think for readers, for listeners, you know, take it in the spirit that we love World of Warcraft so much, we would like to dedicate multiple hours of the podcast to, instead of the amount that we get to usually dedicate to a game or a franchise.
Yeah, and I mean, not only that, but the game is just so large that there's no way to talk about it in any short amount. Like, we were even talking about, you could do one for each expansion and the base game of World of Warcraft, but I think for this podcast, I think splitting it into the eras makes the most sense. And we will see the other eras in the future at some point, but for now we're just going to stick with era 1, which again, the base game, the Burning Crusade, and Wrath of the Lich King, which runs from 2004 until, when does Cataclysm come out? 2010 is when Cataclysm comes out, which to me marks the end of era 1. So right up on through to the end of Wrath of the Lich King is what we're talking about. So about 6 years of of game here.
Yeah.
Well,
Where
maybe
do you
go
you
ahead.
came ahead of me in terms of when you found the franchise. Do you want to
I don't know
like
that that's even true.
situate?
Uh,
Oh, interesting.
so yeah, we're gonna talk about when we came to this game. I will say that in the time of World of Warcraft when it first released in 2004, I was busy doing other stuff, leading a strange life that had nothing to do with video games, really. Despite playing them a ton as a kid, I was. This is released 2004. I was in the last year of high school, but spoiler, I didn't really go. Uh, and now I'm on the verge of getting a PhD, which that's moral enough that you never know where life's going to take you. But also in that time of my life, I was not really playing games. I was doing other more music related stuff, in addition to skipping school, which is fairly on brand. And so I was not really in a position to get into this at all. So I didn't start playing until 2006, end of 2006, which is I played in the lead up to Burning Crusade's release. So I missed all of vanilla or base WoW as it was happening, but I did play through the game for, I think, 3 or 4 months before Burning Crusade released in 2007. So I was playing at the end of 2006. Yeah.
So I started playing in late 2007. So
Okay.
I want to say
So you came in with Burning
October.
Crusade.
I started between the Black Temple and Fury of the Sunwell patches.
Oh, interesting.
Because I remember Fury of the Sunwell launched after I was already at max level, and I never got to raid Black Temple in its time.
Right.
So I kind of rushed through the base game and did a lot of questing, but it was very uneven, and I mostly started playing the end game with friends at the time, focused on Burning Crusade content. So for listeners who know about these raids, a lot of Karazhan, a lot of Tempest Keep, some Serpent Shrine Cavern, no Black Temple, no Caverns of Time, no Zulaman, and then straight into Sunwell. And then I really cut my teeth, I think, as
straight into Sunwell.
Yeah. But we didn't play that much, really. At the time, it was also the holiday period. So I want to situate my arrival to this game a bit differently, which is I remember I had just graduated secondary school, so our Canadian high school. And I had, in the final year of my high school, so in 2004, I had spent the summer working, and I bought myself my first gaming PC. And this was a Intel Celeron Pentium 2 refurbished HP computer that couldn't even run Guild Wars. And this was the PC that I installed World of Warcraft on. And I played from Burning Crusade up to when you and I met with that computer and rated at like 3 frames a second.
That is a terrible thing.
So I enjoyed.
We met in 2016, by the way.
Yeah, but I didn't have a computer that was like a gaming PC for a very long time. I was a console gamer. And so I'm never going to get to say this anywhere else except on this podcast. But I have a 10-man Lich King heroic achievement that I got on that computer. And I don't know what that says about me, but I can tell you I spent a lot of time looking at nondescript black squares
Yeah, this is okay.
on an ice tower.
This is the really interesting thing about, I think, when like this era of coming to PC gaming and like the communal nature of it and the addictive nature of this game, which it is, like
Mm-hmm.
not one to just throw that word around, but like I know that a lot of players in the guilds I was in at this time were in the same situation because like people would build rigs. Like there was a PC gaming culture, but like it wasn't really built around World of Warcraft yet. It was a lot of like competitive FPS
Yeah.
stuff. Like Quake. It was a lot of Quake. This really wasn't where that started yet, and I think especially when this got the South Park episode about it really hit critical mass in the culture, and a lot of people were playing, including myself, on I was playing on a garbage laptop for all the way through Burning Crusade to basically the end of Burning Crusade, I think.
Yeah.
Which is a solid year. I guess it's only a year, but it feels like it's way longer. Wow.
These used to come out very often.
Yeah,
Like they
that's
were,
actually shocking to me that from when I started, yeah, to Wrath of the Lich King wasn't really much more than a year and a couple months. It feels like it was like 3 years with the amount of time I spent playing this game and how much it meant. Like,
yeah.
I think it's a really important thing to talk about, like why I got into this and why I stuck around with it, right?
Please.
And in the start of this game, it is I loved JRPGs as a kid. And then I got into this, and it had the parts of those that I like, which is leveling up your characters, getting to choose, you know, talents or skills in a way that JRPGs kind of didn't at the time give you a ton of choice on. There was, we've since discovered that it's more of the illusion of choice that World of Warcraft gives you, but it was enough to make me feel like I'm customizing my character in a meaningful way, getting gear and going on this adventure in what is a really expansive world, especially at the time. It is like, wow, there is just stuff everywhere. There are weird creatures everywhere. I don't know what's going to happen next. And this was the first place that a lot of players, including myself, got, where the dual faction thing, you had, on your squad a whole half world of people on your side, and then at a certain point in the game you walk into territory that is inhabited by both factions in the game, and you can just hit each other. And so there's this other element that's here as well, where it feels or felt, it feels a bit artificial now, given that we are 20 years later. But at the time, it felt like, whoa, this is a really lived in game experience. And like, I don't think I'm ever going to uncover everything that is here. And I kind of want to spend a lot of time in this world. Now, at the same time, especially in Burning Crusade, there are things like daily quests and stuff you have to do, and you're being habituated to these really addictive patterns that you're not realizing how they're making you want to keep playing every day. But, I think if we just think of the exploitative aspect of the game,
Yeah.
that we've really come to attach ourselves to, especially in like the mobile, post-mobile gaming. We're post, but we're in it still. Where that kind of design has really shown us that like we are being exploited and conditioned in a severe way with every game that we play. I think that takes away some of the magic of what World of Warcraft was, how big it was, how adventurous it was, and how communal and like sociable it was at a time when things like MSN Messenger and ICQ as well, where you would meet rando people on these messaging services. That was just a part of communication and life at the time too, in a way that I think isn't the same anymore. And this encompassed all of those things. And so if you were growing up at this time into games, into that weird transgressive cyber world, like this checked a lot of boxes. And I don't think it was all totally exploitative either. Like this game, especially at the time, was made with love. I don't think it was made in a rote way. It was very exploratory in the way things were designed, and stuff was janky and weird, and it wasn't all figured out, and it didn't all make concrete sense. Some stuff was obtuse in a way that I think the game for a long time later had gotten dumbed down. But the magic was that in like the world that we live in is also imperfect. And I've talked a lot about this with Elden Ring as well, where like there's an authenticity to how not clean parts of this are, to how meaningless some of the quest chains are, to like you're expecting this to take you somewhere and it doesn't, but it just kind of peters out. That feels a bit more real and true and is part of the adventure that got me in the door. What got me to stick around was rating, though, and we'll get to that in a second, unless you want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a corollary to the way that you felt about this, because I had spent a lot of my late high school on the outside looking in. So to reiterate, I also had I had a bad computer, but I also played this game on dial-up, which is
it's brutal.
Like that I think is even more remote for people to imagine, that in 2007 I was still on dial-up where I lived, and a lot of people in my high school had been playing this since 2004, and there was a whole thing of like, I can't go out Friday, I have to raid. There was like this, you know, the memes that South Park made satires out of was kind of real. Like I did see that, where people were organizing their social lives around this, and I didn't really have a lot of disposable income at the time. I was starting Cégep, which is like our pre-college institution, and my friend Vincent, shout out to Vincent, got me the box set that had like base game and Burning Crusade in one as an early birthday present, and he was basically like, get in, loser, we're going raiding.
Yes, he was selling you drugs. Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah.
I made the joke that like, you've got me cocaine for my birthday. You know, I would like to say that I eventually dropped out of school because I was playing World of Warcraft so much. And then I started working at Future Shop, which is was bought out by Best Buy. And I called a month ahead of time to set aside one of the collector's editions for Wrath of the Lich King, which I'm actually physically looking at right now. And I was going to take a week off when that expansion came out. And my boss, a day before the game released, told me that his friend, who also worked in the store, had to take a week off, so he couldn't come into work, so I had to. And the next morning, I drove from my parents' place to work, 40 minutes away. I got in, I paid for my copy, and I literally walked out in front of my boss and quit my job so I could play Wrath of the Lich King. And that's how I quit my second job. And so I feel like for the period ranging from late Burning Crusade to some part of Cata, this game really dominated my entire life. Like I built my life around World of Warcraft for a 2-year period, which is not a healthy thing to do, I'm going to be honest. And it took some figuring stuff out and finding out that I was using WoW more as a coping mechanism for other stuff. But it was communal, and everyone I knew was on it, and every social evening was World of Warcraft, and it was raiding or doing PvP or just hanging out, just being on TeamSpeak at the time with the horrible warbles whenever somebody would use their push to talk button before we had persistent not
that's Ventrilo. Yeah,
it was Vent.
Yeah, I used Vent. I was never on TeamSpeak.
So there's like this there's this period where I think you're right, like it did have the impact that we critique a lot of these service games for having on people. But I didn't see it that way at the time.
I don't think
and
many
I didn't
people
experience
did.
it that way. And it, I think it was supplemented by the fact that like there were 12 million people playing this
Yeah.
game when Wrath was out. This was the game. It had every server was full when I started playing. Like I couldn't find space that I could play this game in, and it was just what everyone I knew was talking about. Was this and Magic the Gathering?
Yeah.
When we had some extra time.
And I would say too, like chats on most servers, even I started this game on a dead server, quote unquote. The chats were alive, the guilds were alive, like the server culture, because now there's weird cross server stuff. Server identities are a bit muddied in a way. There are still some servers that are like notorious for certain things, but like back in the day there were server identities and really strong guild identities, and you would know every guild on your server. Like it felt like an ecosystem or a world within this broader world, right? Your version of World of Warcraft told a, I don't know, a very true feeling story about your neighborhood. It
did feel that way.
Yeah, it did. And then I think the
Do you
other
remember?
thing that I think is really important, and I think maybe, what is this game? What do you really do in this game? You start with your character, you move around, you accept quests from NPCs, you kill random monsters to collect random stuff, and then you turn in those quests and you level up, and you basically do this a million times. But this is not what this is. Every time this is happening, you're seeing someone walk by you, there's a new thing around the corner, and as you get into it, you are, you're hailed. If we go Althazar on this, you're brought into this system. How does this happen? Other players, you're being asked constantly to be in a guild because you see people group this way. You get pushed to content where you need to group with other people, and the next exciting adventure is with other folks. And then once you're in there, you go beyond the walls of the game, right? You talked about TeamSpeak. We were on Ventrilo. When you join a guild, you're going to actually start meeting real people. That's a thing that happened. And like, talking with all these people from all over the place in the guild that I spent most of my time with through Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King. Like I just kept meeting interesting people, and the game, I love the game too, but like, that's not what kept me around. It was the fact that like, this is an actual world. If you treat it, if you view the world as a place that has people that you actually meet in it, right? Like really interesting characters. And it's, I think if you're not used to playing World of Warcraft, you might not know, or you might assume what the World of Warcraft player is, and it's not. Maybe now it is. There are significantly fewer players, but I still don't think it's true. I think there's still a lot of interesting people that play this game. But at a time when there's 12 million players of this game, there are a lot of really interesting, unique people that are not, I don't know, your stereotypical gamer. People who do really interesting things and lead interesting lives. And that, for me, that was always the magic of this. And it still is the magic of this, right? It kept me around. I study World of Warcraft still today.
Yeah.
Like I'm still involved and I'm still meeting really interesting people.
One of the interesting aspects about this too is I suppose for our younger listeners who might have might be different to imagine this. I started playing this game before Facebook was a thing in my life. Like World of Warcraft preceded social media for me, with the exception of MSN Messenger, which I used sporadically, and it was like 10 people. WoW was social media for a lot of us, and it was where we went to hang out and meet people and socialize, especially when we were awkward teenagers still, at least for me anyways. And that is the thing that I think now is segmented differently. Like, I don't want to say it's better or worse, it's just different. But no other game gave you that. Like, the proposition of World of Warcraft was, yes, like adventuring in this open world, doing all these quests, these dungeons, these raids, having these characters that you geared up. But it was being in a place that there was no equivalent for. So, yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Now, that said, I loved raiding. It is it is maybe the single most impactful thing, like the gamey part of a game that has impacted my life the most. It is equivalent to me strumming a guitar and hitting a drum for the first time. Like, the impact of the first raid I ever did is so severe. I don't know if you feel the same way.
It's a bit different in that it's not the first raid, and I think I worked my way up to that. So
I shouldn't say it was the first raid. The first raid I did was Molten Core, which is like the first raid of old base WoW, and I was like, that's fine, but I don't get it. The first Burning Crusade raid that I did really got me into the game. Like, I think it was Megtherodon's lair. I'm fairly sure.
There we go.
And
you click those portals.
Yeah, it was Megtherodon's lair or Karazhan, which is a 10-player. It was a 10-player thing. And
yeah,
10 players need to spend quite a few nights progressing through this place, fighting bosses of different, with different mechanics that present you different challenges. And this is, again, it's that people thing with me. The thing about the raids and the way they were designed is you had to communicate, you had to play well, you had to get to know everybody and build rapport with people, because you weren't going to succeed if you couldn't do that. Like, it wasn't going to work. And the combination of needing solid mechanical skill, needing to be some kind of communicative element, whether you are of those people in the raid, the person who's like dead silent, the person who's keeping the morale up by being funny, the weirdo, the leader, whatever person you were in that group, I loved that, like, all of this was required, and it produced just the perfect balance of like skilled gameplay and just oddities collected in the pursuit of this task, which is, not unlike other things you do in life, but this is a very fun version of it.
I think what's different from your experience to mine is, my first raid was Karazhan, and I had a close a group of friends that I did it with, who were the people who got me into the game. I love those people if they're listening. But that was not a functional raid group. That was kind of a very chaotic experience. There were people who still lived with their parents. And they had dinner time. Like, they were raid leading, but they had to leave for dinner time. And so our Karazhan night, which was Tuesday, would go from 7 p.m. to like 3 a.m. Because we weren't good. Like, we were raiding, but we weren't like efficient at it. But I like the 10 people aspect of it. And then the rest of Burning Crusade was very difficult because my very skilled friends who, I don't even remember the website, but there was a website where you could look at your ranking in your server.
WoW logs, probably.
I think so. And they were pushing like Realm First, Disc Priest, Realms. Like, I had another friend, Patrick, who was like Realm Third, Elemental Shaman, and they really wanted to raid. Yeah. And then the other people who weren't as good didn't want to so much. And so they were like, well, come with us. It'll be fantastic. And at that time, the raiding that I had access to, or the communities that I had access to as a mostly Francophone player, was you had to apply to guilds with like a CV.
Well, that was normal. And that was true of most guilds.
Okay, so that I got into
most
one, but I only got in as
I should qualify. Anyone who raided seriously probably had to do this.
Yeah, so I got put in on a sort of bench warmer situation where I didn't really get to raid much for all of Burning Crusade. Like, I was kind of the backup that never got taken to stuff for that. Now, when Wrath started, and we got a lot more 10 people raids. I started getting a lot more in. And so I raided a lot for Naxxramas, which was like fine, but that was when I felt like I was starting to get my legs. And between Naxxramas and Ulduar, I switched guilds with my friend who was a disc priest, and he was like, "You're really good. We should go raid. This is going to be great." I was playing rogue at the time, which we'll talk about classes a bit more. And so rogues weren't like particularly in demand at that time. And I changed my graphics card, which made my game go from like 5 FPS to like 25. And I finally became a functional player. And I got to rating about 40 to 50 hours a week for that Ulduar patch. And it was like nonstop. It dominated my life. And that was like the most I was into WoW. But I wasn't happy. Like, it was too much rating for me. And I felt like my guild ran my life. Right. Like, they kind of decided what days I got to take a rest, what happened. And so that was also the year I went back to college in the summer following Ulduar. So I quit WoW. And I kind of restructured my life. And I moved into a dorm with I had like a big apartment, and I had my own room, and I brought my PC to work on, but I was alone. I was in a small town, and there wasn't much to do other than to play some games. So I started raiding again during Icecrown Citadel. And then I had full autonomy. I was much older. I had a much healthier relationship with the game, and I was really good at playing my character by then. And so that like 3 to 4 month period for me, the end of Wrath, is the best World of Warcraft has ever been, because it was when it was the most enmeshed with my life in a way that I appreciated, and when I had like the least amount of the toxic people that were around me. And so I have a very fond memories of raiding with 9 other people who are all adults and who understand how to like have a healthy environment to play in, as opposed to when it was like the hyper competitive nonstop version or the super chaotic 25
of players
person.
who weren't particularly good either. And I think that's one of the things that happened in the Burning Crusade era of the game, is like guilds would raid like 5 nights a week, be really like hyper focused on everyone's performance and be really micromanagey, but none of those players were particularly good. Like that's one of those things where I was always like, and still I think guilds still do this, of like, why not just do this a different way? Because like I will say, at the end of Burning Crusade, like I joined like an actual, I finished Burning Crusade. My guild was 10th in the world, like when we finished. All right, like it was.
No, your story is like intense compared to mine.
But the interesting thing about like all those players is that like it was substantially less micromanagey, other than when you were doing progression, which is like you are on curve trying to beat bosses. You're going to raid like every day for like 3 weeks, but then you're done. Like you will have killed the boss and then you're fine. Whereas a lot of the mid-level guilds would raid 5 days a week for half a year trying to get through a thing, and the environment would be even more hostile. Partly because like no one's actually playing very well in those environments, right? And I still think that happens a little bit. I think in Wrath of the Lich King, which really is, I think, the golden age, like it is the peak of this game. I think it's undeniable that was both like culminating all of Warcraft lore up till that point with, the Lich King with Arthas as the central villain. And I don't know, just the snowy aesthetic was also really pleasant compared to the very green and red demon fire theme that Burning Crusade had for the year it was out, which again feels longer than a year, and it might be because that aesthetic is so brutal. Like it is grating on the eyes still. If you ever have to go back to those zones, they look like hell.
There are some beautiful zones like Negron, but otherwise it has like a very contrasting game palette. Yeah, and I even think
it is brutal.
I don't know for you, but I'm actually curious because I don't think we've ever talked about this. Is I I and a lot of people who are exactly my age, like born in the same year as me, we had all played Warcraft 3 on release, like at a very specific moment. And so this game was also like a much broader franchise narrative payoff where like we've been waiting for Arthas for so long. Like it preceded World of Warcraft, even though I hadn't played WoW in the original period where I was like, I've been waiting. I'm 18 and I've been waiting for this since I was 9 years old to like wrap up, right? It was like a pre-Avengers Endgame situation for some of us, I think. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
No, it was. It really was that moment. And also the game like played the best. You could do 25-person rating. You could do 10-person rating. It was really accessible. The achievement system was brought in. So you didn't just have to play only to, beat the raids. There were other avenues of expressing your skill or whatever aspect of the game, brought you into it, whether it's like collecting or exploring or whatever. It appealed to player types of different kinds now in a way that I think the game didn't really in the Burning Crusade era, where it became really raid focused only. And there was really only one way to do it, which was in this really intense way when most of the player base still wasn't very good. Whereas in Wrath, everything kind of came together. And honestly, Wrath of the Lich King is probably an all-timer game. Like, yeah,
I would agree with you and say like of the three, it is the one that I consider like the best the game has been. Yeah. I know original World of Warcraft is like its impact is impossible to overstate in terms of how the industry has developed afterwards. Like, it is the I don't want to make like outlandish claims, but I'm fairly sure it is the first like actual service game with a subscription that you could pay, and it has like
I don't
the
think
game
that's
changed
true.
So much. Okay, then belay that comment. Yeah. But Wrath, I think, to me feels like the fully realized form of the game, with all the systems that came into play, and that's not fair to the people who worked on the previous expansions, but that's how it feels.
No, it really does feel that way, and I think that's really an interesting point given what happens next, and maybe in terms of like this narrative we're building before we'll get into some of the segments we're going to do on this, is like there's an interesting ellipsis that happens at the end of Wrath of the Lich King, which is it takes a much longer time for the next expansion to come out. Like, there's a huge chunk of downtime between the last bit of content that's added to the game and the Cataclysm expansion. And then,
like a full year, right?
It was a really long downtime. I think it's pretty close to a year.
Fall of the Lich King is December 2009, and the release of Cata is December 2010. Now, I know there's this small like micro raid with the Ruby Dragons.
Yeah.
But outside of that, exclusively that raid.
Yeah.
You're right. It's a full year
of just the same game, and I think that was probably the first time in the game when it had such an egregious like drought of content. But then also, again, that marks the end of this first era, and there is a philosophy shift going into the next expansion, which we're not going to talk about today, but like, there's a reason the peak was there, and it hasn't really gotten back to that point, I think.
No, I don't think so. I think the closest it got back in terms of player count was Legion.
Yeah.
Much later. But yeah.
But let's live in the good times. All right.
That's that's the sort of macro story of the game, but
yeah.
I want to talk about the nitty-gritty, the fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about classes. Let's talk about what we played, because I think one of the important parts of what this game is the character you are, that fantasy that you inhabit, what they now call class fantasy in a very designery kind of way. But really it is the adventure, who you are on this adventure, right? And the game is full of classes. I don't think we're going to go through them all, but we will talk about what we played and why. So what did you, when you started your adventure, what were you?
So for this entire period, I only played one character, which is a bit of a scary thought. And it's not a class I chose voluntarily. So when I started playing, in Burning Crusade, I asked my friends, what do I play? There's so many classes. And now looking back, there's like a clear choice that I should have picked.
Yeah.
But the answer I was given was, well, if you want to play at the end game with us, the only thing we don't have currently is a rogue. So play a rogue. And this was also the heyday of when rogues were kind of made fun for being a simplistic class where you press 2 and 4.
Yeah, they were also good for a lot of Burning Crusade, though.
Yeah, but I was not.
Yeah, well.
Which is that's a different discussion. But to me, it's sort of like my World of Warcraft test character because I played it for so long. By the end of Wrath of the Lich King, I was really ready for a change, and I would actually go on to completely change my class after this. But I played exclusively combat rogue for the entire period that ran from 2007 to 2010.
I think it's really interesting, even thinking about like how you talk about this game now, and there's always an apprehension that you have to it. I think like you both like this game and respect it and love it and are nostalgic for it, but I think you also really hate this game. Like whenever you talk about it, and
I'll tell you,
it's so revealing that like, yeah, you for what 2 years you played a class that you didn't really choose for some reason. It was never something you were really invested in the way I think you need to be.
Yeah, I tend to be. So I think I may have spoken about this in past episodes, but I am the kind of player who, like, I've played only Rangers in Pathfinder for nigh on 14 years, if I can. I've played elves in Magic the Gathering for virtually every iteration of the game I've played. I have my preferences, and I'm okay with that. And I was kind of locked into a situation where if I wanted to be social with my friends, I had to play this class. I didn't dislike Rogue, but I didn't get to experiment with other classes for a very long time. And the reputation around Rogue, at least in the circles that I was in, was not good. Like, they weren't a class that people were desirous to have around. This was way before, what we have now with the group utility. They were effectively like a cannon of damage. And I wasn't doing PvP either. And I think the worst part of it for me was I started playing and there were 11 of us. Our friend group was exactly 11 players. And so when I got to Karazhan, I had a friend who decided that after not really playing the game for so long, he would come back to play. And he was the rogue I was kind of replacing. And so I got stuck into a situation where I was constantly competing with this one other person to be around the friend group, to participate, because the whole social life was raiding. And it was the 10-man raid most of the time. This was before we sort of split up and went to do other stuff. And so those early years, and when I speak about them, I think with some reticence, is because I felt like I was playing in a pressure cooker for like a year and a half, 2 years time before I got to the end of Wrath, when I was living by myself in a completely different guild on a server on my own. And that's when I felt like I was playing the game on my terms, and I enjoyed it. And that's also when I realized that Rogue, I imagine you can imagine this, but like, was not the right class for me. Like, it is not the class I should be playing. The classes that I play now are Warrior and Hunter, depending on if I want to tank or not. Mm-hmm. And so it felt like a very intense time. I was also asked to be the blacksmith and to gather materials to craft other people's shit for them for Burning Crusade, which, if anyone is curious, that's what we call unpaid labor. But
that era of the game had a lot of unpaid labor. Like, there was a
kind
lot of doing that kind of thing for other people, especially in the guild. But if you ran a guild, you also got to siphon funds. So, it really was.
So your class was Guildmaster.
Economic system. I was an officer for most of Burning Crusade and Wrath, and I made a lot of gold. is all I'm gonna say. Um,
So what did you play? What was
yeah, so
your
I came
entry
I
into the
came into the
franchise?
game as a druid because I like the idea of moonkin. Well, what a moonkin is a fat owl that shoots light from the moon. Um, and that's what I think that a druid can turn into, because a druid is a shapeshifter in World of Warcraft. And I just thought it was hilarious and amazing, and kind of cute in like the hideous way, where it's not really cute, but it is. And so that's what I played most of the game as I was leveling. Now, through the Burning Crusade, Moonkin wasn't really a viable thing to play in groups. And so, like many a druid in the Burning Crusade, I became a restoration druid, which is a healer. So World of Warcraft's group content is based upon the Holy Trinity system, where you have a tank, something that attracts the monsters and the monsters hit, the DPS or damage, things that hit the monsters, and then the healer, a thing that heals everybody. I was a healer for a really long time. Throughout all of Burning Crusade, I was a restoration druid. And I was pretty good. But it was
Should be
also a
noted.
thing that's easy to be good at. It was a very, very strong healer throughout that expansion. So I had a very comfortable time.
It should be noted that healers are kind of a thankless job sometimes, and so
See, I think they are now a lot of the time. I think back in the day, and this is one of the things about Era 1 that I really like, even though I'm not a healer anymore, I think there was a lot more appreciation for folks who did those shit jobs. Like tanking as well, I think, is a pretty thankless job, and it's a high pressure job. Because, you know, if a DPS makes a mistake in most fights, it like they look like a fool, but they don't waste everybody's time. If a tank makes a mistake, you really are wasting everybody's time. And I think to some degree, most players, at least in the guilds I was in, but I think this was true in group content as well, folks were way more forgiving to those roles in general, and way more appreciative. I mean, certainly for me, I was asked to go everywhere, and no one gave me shit, even if I let somebody die, which was rare, but it did happen. Like, let's be honest. But yeah, I don't know. That's something happened, right? Like, I mean, the player base changed. Like there's a whole new influx of people who play WoW. There are people who didn't start playing WoW until the third era of the game, right? And again, games like League of Legends came out and really changed the way we talk about each other as we play games, which is a thing that happened and then feeds back into WoW. Like there was a huge cultural shift with the release and the mainstreamification of that game as well, and like this feedback loop, and then Twitch as well. And I think there was just in general a different vibe that I think was really cool, and something that couldn't be returned to. I mean, there was like this idea that classic WoW, which came out and has now replicated, or it's close to replicating, the full cycle of Era 1. And one of the things that I see come up about this a lot too is that like it can't be done. Like it's absolutely not the same, even though it's pretty close to the same. It's just, it isn't. It will never be.
People are different.
The people are different. The culture is different. The amount of knowledge we have about this content is different. It's just, all of it has changed. Even if the systems were exactly the same, we have changed so much that it can never be. But yeah.
So did you stick with Druid for that whole time?
Through all of Burning Crusade, I did my first raid, which was Karazhan or Magtheridon. It was one of the two. They were both very close together as a Resto Druid, and I finished out that expansion, having killed the last boss of that expansion, killed Jaden in a guild that ranked 10th in the world as a Resto Druid. I started at the bottom, and I ended at the bottom of the top. As a Resto Druid, yeah. And I love that. I was really proud of that. Like, it's a thing that, like, I don't know. It's a silly thing in hindsight where it's like, wow, you're one of the best Resto Druids in the world at this game. who cares? Like it's one of those things where I was like, that's cool, because I wasn't really good when I started, I don't think, but I managed in the guilds I was in to impress the people enough, and I was again better enough than the other healers that I would always be asked to be a healing officer. I would be put in charge of stuff, and I thought that was neat that I was able to improve and then end in this, in a game of 12 million players, I was among the best at that time, and that's cool. And I think creates a very different relationship to the game than the one that you had. And I would imagine that if I never went to that other guild near the end of the expansion, that I probably would have a very similar feeling of like, God, we're spending a lot of time on the encounters here. Like, why are we raiding 5 days a week still, and have a very different, I don't know, feel of that. But yeah, so I played that Resto Druid through that time. Then I took a break because one of the things that did happen if you were raiding on the cutting edge is that like you did run out of stuff to do pretty quick though. Like within that first month of that last raid in Burning Crusade, you were done. Like you beat it. And then the game, what did you do? Because typically in every raid of a certain expansion, you're gearing yourself up because the next tier will come out and you're going to progress through that. And you need all that gear from the prior raid. At the end of the expansion, all of that stuff that you're getting, there's nothing else to beat. Like you've done it. And so I lost a lot of motivation. And then when the next expansion comes out, everything kind of resets. So there's no need to keep playing. From that point of view, you can play to socialize, but I think a lot of people in that guild, especially, were tired, and so I didn't stick around with them. I had some personal questions about some of their policies that became more apparent over time, where I was like, I don't think this is the place for me long term. But it was nice to at least say that I played at that level, which was cool. And then I started again as a Resto Druid in Wrath of the Lich King. I got some of the old crew back together from a prior guild. They were on a different server, and so I followed them over. And then, I ended up switching to a Moonkin for a while because it finally became viable. And then I switched classes entirely midway through Wrath of the Lich King, and I played an Arcane Mage until the end of Wrath of the Lich King. So during Era 1, I was only two things, really. Resto Druid, a week of Moonkin, and then an Arcane Mage.
That 1 week, though.
It was okay.
Fantastic.
It was fine.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, okay, so this is our experience of the game, right? Which is, I mean, we've been on this for a while now because the game is so large. And how we approach the game. But thinking about, trying to give some games criticism to the folks listening to us. If you had to think about your favorite raid in terms of the stuff that is in it, like in terms of encounters or lore, what would you pick?
So I have two. The one that is not right, like this is like objectively not the best raid, and I don't think it's even my favorite, and like history has not been kind to it, it's the Sunwell Plateau, which is the last raid of the Burning Crusade. It doesn't have many bosses. All the bosses were kind of like overtuned, like they were all really hard, but not like they weren't like mechanically dense even. They were just kind of like, if you screw up or your luck is bad or this thing spawns in the wrong spot, like you're going to have a pretty bad time. Things like that. Like the hardest boss in the game that was like doable, quote unquote, was Muru, which was the second last boss of that raid. Geez. And honestly, I still couldn't tell you why it's hard other than like pretty much any mistake just ends the attempt. But like mechanically, it's like not even as difficult as current dungeon bosses in WoW. It's such a strange thing. Like, and I think even in Classic, it didn't live very long because everyone was like, why was this ever hard? And yet it's like, I don't know. But that race for all the world firsts was really tight. I was in it, so that felt nice. You know, especially for the Kill Jaden part, the last boss of the expansion. And he has some really cool effects where he like comes out of a portal in the ground and he's this huge guy towering over you, hitting you with a laser. Like, he was unlike the other bosses in the game up until that point. And I just thought it was really cool. And it was the culmination of like my year-long journey really of the game, which felt again like 3 years. Like it felt like such a long time.
You lived 3 years in 1 year.
No, it really felt like it, honestly. The only other time in my life that's felt like that was living in Japan, where every year felt longer than a year, right? Like, just, but there are those moments where it's like, wow, this feels like so much longer than it actually was. So that's one. The actual best raid is probably Ulduar, which was the second raid tier of Wrath of the Lich King, which was this like, God, I don't even know how you would describe it. Kind of this space, starry, astrology, Greek inflected.
I can take a stab at it because it's my favorite as well.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of people's favorites, and I think with good reason. It is still gorgeous. Like, the textures are hideous, but like design-wise, it's kind of perfect.
Imagine a perfect fusion of Greek temples and Norse gods, where you get to fight the Norse gods, and everything is enormous and very larger than life and mythological, and it's this enormous capstone raid to a lot of the characters that appear in Wrath of the Lich King, and so you get to spend a lot of time with them as you're questing, and it pays off. Like, the really people like Thorim, right, who's around in that raid.
You know what it's like? I think the way you engage with those gods in the quests and stuff, and then where you meet up with them in the raid, is very similar to Elden Ring. It has like the exact same kind of, you get the exact right soupçon of their character, and you see them played out exactly right in this raid as well, with the lines of dialogue that they have of like, I remember you from the mountains, right? Which is a meme, but it's also like, no, that's right, I was there in the mountain. Yeah, and it's cool. And your wife is actually a tentacle. And like all of those little bits of lore, it's the exact right amount of world building for this kind of game. And I think they kind of dropped the ball on that in later raids, but this is just like the apex of that.
I would also say that it is, in my mind, the actual first Wrath of the Lich King raid, because the first one is Naxxramas, but Naxxramas is a redux of the original Naxxramas, and so it was fun, very different. It was fun, but it didn't mesh as well with I think the story that was like happening around you. It makes sense for it to be where it is and everything, but it didn't feel like this enormous capstone fight. Like, there's a big difference between Kel'Thuzad as a boss and Yogg-Saron as a boss in terms of what you're doing and getting sent to all these different like moments in history, and it's got like just this unreal complexity in terms of structure. Like, that was kind of, for me, when I was like, this is amazing, even though I spent, I think, much more time, and I remember my time with raiding in Wrath at ICC being more enjoyable. I still think like as a raid experience, Ulduar is kind of something special that I think they tried to recapture a bit in Battle for Azeroth with the first and last raid, to not great effect, unfortunately. I wish those were a bit better, but this raid was amazing.
One of the things that they managed to do with Era 1, I think this is even true of the first raid of Burning Crusade, the 10-player raid Karazhan, which is like a wizard's tower. You start at the bottom and you work your way all up to the top. And like as you go up to the top, you get more demonic presence because that's what has infiltrated this tower. It's like they did so much with so little. Like the technology was not there at the time to really make all of this in the way they really wanted to. And now we're there where you have the ability to have these really high definition zones in this game where the graphics are still dated, but like they're not that really. Like a lot of this stuff is updated and looks pretty good, but there's something with the way they used what little they had that was somehow so much more effective. Not just effective, but affective. Like, man, you felt differently at all those old, janky, bad textures. It was just all arranged perfectly to really give you this sense of like awe and like adventure. And something in the present, although I will say that I am feeling a bit better about how they're handling the current uh, stuff that they're doing. But between Era 1 and now, despite all the improvements, despite the scope and scale of the game, for some reason they lost that part of the magic, the Aldwar part, even Icecrown Citadel, which is the technically not the last, but it really is the last raid of Wrath of the Lich King, felt so much more special for some reason. Like I don't know what they were missing since then, but something happened.
I don't want to say that like they were less creative with subsequent expansions, and we'll talk about it when we do Era 2. They are, I think, in some ways very daring in terms of how they approach the universe they've built. But it did feel, I think, at the end of Icecrown into the beginning of Cataclysm, it felt like a post... It felt a lot like Marvel feels now, where it was like, there are new stories being told, and many of these are interesting in specific ways. But it felt like we're resetting a story that's been going on for 10 years. The big looming villain of the franchise has been dealt with, and there are other big villains, but this was the one that people had their sights on for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it felt like everything going, part of what you talked about with the original World of Warcraft into Wrath is the game was highly experimental up until Cataclysm. Like, there was a sense that every, like the Flame Leviathan fight in Ulduar is the first time we had a vehicle-centric raid boss, and it felt really different. And then there was like the madness mechanic. Like, there were a bunch of things that were happening around that period that were really cool, and we haven't talked about them, and I don't know if we're going to have time today even, but all of these raids were often supplemented by a grouping of dungeons that like built up to the mechanics we're going to see in the raid. And the dungeon offering was very, very strong throughout. Like, I can't of those, like the first two expansions, especially, like the dungeons are very like economical. Like, there's only the dungeons that need to be there, and all of them do different things, and they're really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I remember very fondly like the dungeons in Zangar Marsh, for example. Shadowfens? Is that the one with the fungus people? That's Beauregard.
Mm-hmm.
It's been like 2 decades.
Yeah.
Who can remember? But I feel like some of the design got a bit less experimental and also a bit less tuned for a while after that. And it wasn't that like the game that we would get for the next couple of years was bad. I think it was just comparatively, like, we had grown. We had more technical know-how. We understood the game better. We were in a place to critique it more. It was also a bit of a time of readjustment and reinvention for the series. And I think all of those things kind of gel together. But it makes Wrath feel like this sort of persistent 10. Like, I don't even know what to compare it with, because yeah, I don't want to make some undue claims with like film, but it is one of those like masterpiece game installments that like I haven't met anyone who's like I hate Wrath of the Lich King.
I don't know how you could. It from the for me, the moment you get on the boat and it's playing that, I don't know what instrument it even is, the hurdy-gurdy music as you're going through this valley with, you got ships that are like impaled on spikes with like grappling hooks on fire, and it's just this, maximal Nordic vibe. Like from that moment to when you beat Arthas, it is just like the whole way through. It's a ride. Like,
I have a very important question for you,
yeah.
and we may have the same answer, but I always, this makes me think about the past in specific ways. So when you start Wrath of the Lich King,
Mm-hmm.
there are 2 zones you can pick.
Yeah, I always pick. Well, go ahead.
There's Borean Tundra and Howling Fjord.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of player are you, Mark?
Howling Fjord is better, and it's always the one I used to pick. Borean Tundra is much faster to level in.
Yes. Howling Fjord is, I don't say objectively a lot, but it is objectively the better zone.
It's amazing. It's one of the best zones they've done.
This is the North
zone that they have on the announce video of Wrath of the Lich King, is you
so good
going through there because of how amazing it looks. Like,
and no shade to the people who worked on Borean Tundra. I also didn't really like the Blue Dragon part of Borean Tundra. That's like,
oh, I love Blue Dragons though. I think they're like coolest dragon.
This expansion is really strange for me because like some of the zones I really don't like, but overall my experience is just like,
they're the magic dragon. They're all
this.
about magic, and then Malagos went crazy, and you have to fight him on dragons. It's amazing. It's man, Era 1 of this game, amazing. Chef's kiss. Thank you, Blizzard Entertainment, for making it. And I do appreciate that you've continued to make this game, despite you maybe not making it in the way I or anyone I've ever met is super into you having done. But Dragonflight, it's looking like a promising start to this new era. The last thing I think we wanted to do, given that we are nearing the end of time, is you proposed a segment in which we decide which astrological sign each of these expansions is.
Correct.
Or not just expansions, base World of Warcraft as well.
I think that's where we're heading with this. And
okay,
by the time we get to like the new era, maybe there will be 12 installments.
That's right.
We will have completed the circle.
Okay. Base World of Warcraft. My personal take on this, and I am not biased as the star sign, is that base World of Warcraft is the Capricorn of the expansions. It's the goat.
It's the goat. And it's also slow. It methodically takes you through the game. You're slowly ramping up like a goat on a mountain. It's all about slow, steady progression and taking your time, but working towards goals. And it's at the core of this game. That would be my my suggestion for base World of Warcraft.
I will allow it because I only know my own astrological sign.
I don't know it so well, so it's going to be good.
Okay.
What do you feel Burning Crusade is like?
Burning Crusade is probably a Leo or a Taurus.
Leo is what I was going to go with as well.
Yeah.
Very self-involved. Very, I'm the star now. Like we did it. I'm the best. Look at me. Also, all Blood Elves have strong Leo energy.
No, it's true. Yeah, I mean, we both kind of were thinking that, so I think it has to be like, if your gut says it, and yeah, Burning Crusade is 100% a Leo. Wrath of the Lich King. This is interesting.
I'm thinking about it.
Where are you relative to the vernal equinox?
It's not a Pisces. The worst expansion is going to be the Pisces.
Yo, dog, my
Pisces
wife's a
Maya.
Pisces. Pisces are nice, man. Dragonflight gets to be a Pisces.
Okay, maybe. How do you feel? It's life of the party. I don't feel like it's the party expansion. Like it's not the like we're just having fun and it's
none
all,
of the
like,
other ones are either.
Well, there is a case for one of them.
Okay.
There's a case for one of them that really like that is not a narratively dark expansion. It's just we're having fun. What about Virgo? A seemingly cold but very well structured, very well mannered expansion that is sort of just managing all of the stuff that World of Warcraft has done best.
I will allow it.
I can't wait for all of the other star sign people who listen to this to just send us like angry messages being like, you got it wrong.
Yeah, I fully admit I
not...
don't know anything about the star signs other than I am a Gemini. It's
a wonder that we're friends.
Well.
So maybe as our lead off, as we end this podcast, do you want to give your favorite line? I have one too, for once.
Oh, my favorite line. My actual favorite line is Terran Gorfiend in Black Temple, where he is the first Death Knight, and as you're walking into his room to fight his ass in this really weird fight where you have to pilot these little bone guys to kill ghosts, he says, I was the first, a lot of time has passed and I have a lot of catching up to do. And the way he says it, like that fucking delivery with the Black Temple music and the aesthetic is so fucking good. I always love that line. It was my favorite for a long time.
I'm going to go with a line I heard so many times that I thought I was going to hear it until the day I died in my nightmares. The menagerie is for guests only. Which is the curator in Karazhan's opening quote.
Yeah. I like that you gravitate towards the one that tormented you. And I'm like, I just thought this line was so good.
I form really unhealthy associations, don't I?
I just love that Terran Gorfiend's line is the most like, he's not even going to tell you how badass he is. He's just like, just so you know, I was the first one. Like
the Liam Neeson of Death Knights.
He's just like, I have a particular set of skills, and then he proceeds to use none of the skills that Death Knights use in the lore of the game. He's a terrible boss, but the line is good. That's World of Warcraft Era 1.
Thanks for sticking. Yeah, thanks for sticking with us, and hopefully you also have fond memories of World of Warcraft, and eventually we'll get to Era 2.
But not for quite some time, as it is not on the list of the next 30 games we're talking about.
That's true.
But next week, there will be something else that we have played. And maybe
Correct.
You have too. See you next time.
Bye.